This happened a year ago, a spine-chilling tale about a messed-up alumni reunion. We rented out this old industrial warehouse for the get-together, you know, the kind with rusty metal beams and dim flickering lights. The place had an eerie vibe from the get-go. Everything seemed normal at first, with the usual mix of catching up, there was laughter and fluid conversations. But suddenly, things got weird. A guy named Mark showed up at the party. He looked restless and very nervous. Mark started talking to people, weaving himself into conversations, claiming he was part of our class. No one really questioned it, assumed he was a face we'd forgotten. That's where we messed up. As we chatted, he started dropping hints about some dark stuff he'd gotten into since our school days. Mentioned brushes with the law, shady dealings, etc. The more he talked, the more uncomfortable the atmosphere became. It was like everyone could feel the tension building. At one point, Mark went off on a rant about some score he'd made and how he had to skip town. Paranoia kicked in and he kept glancing over his shoulder like he was being followed. We all thought he was just spinning some wild tales, trying to impress or scare us. Then, out of nowhere, the atmosphere shifted. Mark's eyes widened and he whispered something about them being here. We thought he was off his rocker until we heard the distant wail of sirens. Turns out the warehouse was surrounded by cop cars. Panic set in and Mark bolted for the exit, yelling at everyone to scatter. We didn't know what was going on, but we didn't stick around to find out. As we dispersed, we heard shouts, footsteps, and the unmistakable sound of a scuffle. Later, we pieced together the story. Turns out Mark had some serious warrants out for his arrest. The reunion turned into a hotbed for law enforcement, and we unwittingly hosted a felon with a guilty conscience. The night ended with Mark in cuffs and the rest of us trying to shake off the surreal encounter. The warehouse, once a backdrop for our reunion, became a chilling reminder that you never really know what your old classmates might be hiding, a reunion with a twist that none of us saw coming.
This is my experience and the most chilling from a high school reunion that turned into a real-life horror show. We're all gathered, swapping stories and pretending like our lives are perfect, when this guy, Mike, starts stirring up trouble. More than 30 years have passed since our high school graduation, and therefore, we all looked very different from how we remembered ourselves. In my case, I was never friends with Mike, but he became relatively well known because he was frequently in the principal's office because of the problems he caused, and in my mind, from the little I remembered, he was a boy, thin, with abundant hair, very different from the obese, bald guy who was now in front of me. Mike was never the most stable dude, but tonight he took it to a whole new level. Since he took advantage of every opportunity to say dark secrets to people, things they shouldn't know about each other. It was like he'd been keeping tabs on everyone, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The room turned into a pressure cooker of paranoia. Friends started looking at each other sideways, wondering who spilled their secrets to Mike. It wasn't just casual gossip, he was playing puppet master with everyone's lives. As he talked to more people, Mike's words became more sinister. He revealed stuff that could ruin careers and relationships. It was as if chaos was his endgame, and he was relishing every moment of the destructive storm he'd unleashed. The atmosphere got tense, and people were on edge, not knowing what else Mike had up his sleeve. It wasn't just a reunion anymore, it was a psychological thriller, and we were all trapped in Mike's twisted plot. Shortly after the meeting began, we were all arguing and accusing each other, a situation that Mike took advantage of to leave the place without being seen. And the reunion, meant to be a nostalgic trip, turned into a nightmare. A few months later, I found out that some former generation colleagues hired a private investigator to find out where Mike currently lived, to get revenge in some way, but the confusion was even greater when knowing that Mike had passed away 5 years ago. So who was the person who impersonated Mike? What motivated him to investigate the lives of others and display them in front of everyone? To this day we do not know, but what we are convinced of is that the evil in this world presents itself in ways and in places that we believe are safe and peaceful.
Let me spin a chilling tale about a reunion that went south real fast. We decided to meet up at a rented hall, nothing fancy, just a bunch of old classmates catching up over some drinks and nostalgia. The night was buzzing with laughter and memories until this guy we didn't recognize slipped into the mix. Let's call him Rick. He looked like he belonged, blending in seamlessly. But something felt off. As the night went on, Rick started talking to people, weaving himself into conversations, claiming he was part of our class. No one really questioned it, assumed he was a face we'd forgotten. That's where we messed up. As the night wore on, Rick's behavior turned strange. He kept pressing for personal info, asking about people's homes, routines, things you wouldn't normally share with a casual acquaintance. A few folks got uneasy, but we shrugged it off, thinking maybe he was just socially awkward. Then, things took a dark turn. A couple of wallets went missing, and people started realizing their phones were disappearing too. Suspicion fell on Rick, who was now acting nervously, glancing around like a trapped animal. Someone confronted him, accusing him of stealing, and that's when all hell broke loose. Rick snapped, denying everything. It turned into a heated argument, and in the chaos, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a switchblade. Panic set in. People screamed, ducked for cover. Rick was waving the knife around, making wild threats. It was a nightmare scenario, a reunion turning into a crime scene. Someone managed to sneak up behind him and disarm him, but the damage was done. The police were called, and Rick was hauled away in cuffs, still shouting about being innocent. The reunion ended on a sour note, the rented hall forever tainted by the memory of a dangerous imposter who slipped in among us, turning a night of reminiscing into a tale of danger we'd rather forget.